Elderly people nowadays tend to be finding their way into the criminal justice system. In the past, we used to see the elderly as victims, but now they are perpetrators of crime. In 2002, there were 532,977 reported arrests for various crimes for those aged 50 and over. About 15% of those elders arrested were involved in serious felonies, such as murder, sex offenses, robbery, and aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, and drug trafficking. There is no national agreement about the age at which an inmate is considered elderly. The U.S. Census Bureau defines the general elderly population as those aged 65 and older. Although most 50-year-olds are not considered elderly, the aging process appears to speed up for those people who are incarcerated. Some contributing factors include a person's poor physical or mental health prior to their incarceration. These include factors such as substance abuse, lack of access to health care, inadequate care, poverty, and lack of education. According to the National Commission on Correctional Health Care, the most correctional systems in the United States lack enough healthcare delivery and usually implement contracts. Many facilities do not have acceptable policies and procedures to adequately document and manage the healthcare needs of prisoners. Early 50s is the age at which an inmate is considered elderly and the beginning of specific diseases that require attention and medical care. The prevalence of chronic diseases becomes problematic after the age 50. Men over the age of 50 begin to see many diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and prostate problems. For elderly inmates, the management of chronic diseases becomes a major effect. Correctional officials need to balance the need for cost efficiency with the needs of the elderly inmates to receive adequate medical treatment. As inmates age, they require more medical attention. Many chronic diseases can be managed through proper education, exercise, and healthy eating habits. Inmates who require a special diet may cost more to feed in the long run. Prisons were not built to meet the needs and vulnerabilities of older people. Over the past 20 years, states have had no choice but to build special needs facilities or secure nursing homes to shelter geriatric inmates. A little over half of the states now provide geriatric accommodation, ranging from selected clustering, dedicated units, freestanding prisons, or dedicated secure nursing home facilities. Some states have changed mental health hospitals into special needs facilities for elderly inmates, while others have to rely on new construction. Older prisoners differ from younger inmates not only in their need for medical care, but also in their psychological needs. Older inmates show a greater need for privacy and access to preventive health care and legal assistance. Older inmates are unable to handle the fast pace and noise of a regular facility. Older inmates report feeling unsafe and weak to attack by younger inmates. They prefer to room with people their own age. Housing an elderly inmate population can create issues. One of the biggest problems for the elderly inmates is the design of the prisons. Prisons are made out of steel, concrete, and stairways that are not accessible for those with disabilities or incapacities. Prisons can also be very hot, cold, damp, and have excessive noise levels. There is little access to elevators, wheelchair ramps, and inadequate access to health programs, recreational services, and specialized medical treatment. Amenities needed by the elderly, such as bed rails and bathing equipment, are impractical or rejected because of security concerns. Older inmates are not the same. Many variable influences their classification and management. This includes their health, personal background, criminal lifestyle, life experience, religious beliefs, and relationship with family members and peers. The U.S. Department of Justice identifies three types of elderly inmates: first offenders, repeat offenders, and long-term offenders. Each group has its own qualities. First-time offenders include inmates who have committed their crime after 50 years old. First-time offenders are incarcerated primarily because of the changes associated with aging, such as reduced social interactions or increased stresses placed on primary relationships. This can create conflict and can trigger a passion of crime. Biological changes can also influence first-time offenders. Biological changes in the brain cause decrease in inhibition and impulse control. Loss of ordinary social rules and stubbornness can often lead to aggression. This group is prone to violence. The most common offenses are aggravated assault, sexual assault, and murder. First-time incarcerated older inmates are commonly disturbed and are at risk for suicide, aggression, and other mental illnesses. They are most likely to have problems adjusting to prison life since it is new to them. This can cause stress and possible health problems. Repeat offenders are criminals who have been in and out of prison for most of their lives. They commonly have substance abuse problems that can lead to chronic diseases such as asthma, heart problems, or circulatory problems, kidney problems, or even liver problems. Repeat offenders adjust better to prison life because they experience being in and out of prison for quite some time. They have substance abuse, a history of violence, and mental illnesses that play a part in their reincarceration. And they tend to find life outside of prison difficult because of these problems. Long-term offenders consist of inmates who have longer life sentences and grow old in prison. They are more comfortable in prison than other offenders because they have been in prison for many years. Being in prison does not bother them as much because they're used to other inmates, the living situation, the environment, and being away from the family and friends. This group has accepted their fate behind bars. Now, some cases I'm going to talk about is the case in Caldwell versus Bannister, a Nevada state prisoner who was denied cataract surgery because of a Nevada Department of Corrections policy, which cataract surgery is refused if an inmate can function in prison with one eye. A 67-year-old inmate named John Caldwell was blind in one eye due to his cataract. The doctors recommended cataract surgery, which can restore his vision. The surgery was denied by Nevada Department of Corrections supervisory medical personnel because of the one eye policy. Caldwell is serving multiple criminal sentences without the possibility of parole. He did not have eye problems when he was incarcerated in 1991, but developed cataract in both eyes. He had cataract removal surgery on his left eye in 2001, and by October 2001, he developed cataract in his right eye, causing him to go blind. That cataract has never been treated. Dr. Bannister, who is a medical director but not an optometrist or ophthalmologist, claimed that his cataract does not cause pain, require urgent attention, or can lead to permanent vision loss. He stated that a delay in removing cataract causes no harm. Caldwell filed a lawsuit claiming the violation of his Eighth Amendment rights. His claims that the prison officials were unconcerned with his serious medical needs and refused him surgery to restore his vision. Researchers have found that age is one of the most significant predictors of criminality. Criminal or delinquent activity decreases as a person ages. Older offenders are less likely to commit additional crimes after they're released than younger offenders. Studies on parole recidivism found that the probability of parole violations also decrease with age. Older parolees are least likely to be reincarcerated. A 2004 analysis of people under federal sentence guidelines found that within 2 years of release, the recidivism rate among offenders older than age 50 was only 9.5% compared to those offenders older than 50, which was 35.5% for those younger than the age of 21. Releasing some elderly inmates before the end of the sentence poses a relatively low risk to the public. Elderly offenders are the least dangerous group of people behind bars, but the most expensive to incarcerate. The number of elderly prisoners is increasing. States could save about $66,000 per year for elderly inmates for each elderly inmate released from prison. This money can be put into something better such as education. About $16 billion are being spent on the aging prisoner population alone every year. As the number of prisoners increase, the number of elderly inmates increase even more due to longer sentences. Aging prisoners do not pose a serious threat to the public safety. They are highly unlikely to commit new crimes upon release. There are 15 states and the District of Columbia that define processes for releasing elderly inmates. These processes vary from state to state and include discretionary parole, inmate furloughs, and medical release. To be eligible for geriatric release, inmates must meet a number of requirements, usually related to their age, medical condition, and risk to public safety. The eligibility requirements may include restrictions that can prevent consideration. Many states make inmates ineligible for geriatric release due to disparity of the offense of conviction. In some states, older inmates may not be eligible until they have served a minimum length of their sentence. Most states that permit the early release of older prisoners have set the age eligibility at 60 or 65 years of age. Most eligibility requirements include certain physical conditions, such as chronic infirmity, illnesses, disease related to aging, and if the inmate is physically incapacitated or the inmate is in need of long-term care. There are people who believe that older inmates should be segregated from the younger inmates. Segregation decreases the odds that the younger inmates will prey on the older inmates. Segregation provides older inmates the opportunity to build friendships with people their own age. Building friendship can help reduce loneliness, despair, and help build self-respect. Age-based segregation allows units to be designed as an older-friendly physical environment. The physical environment can include features such as fewer stairwells, more ramps, handrails, lower bunks, quiet communal areas, and non-wax floors to reduce slips and falls. These physical environment modifications in segregated units address the older inmates' safety needs and physical limitations. The number of elderly inmates is rising and will continue to increase as time goes by. Keeping elderly inmates behind bars can affect the state and federal resources. It can also affect taxpayers significantly. It is very expensive to put an inmate behind bars. It is even more expensive to keep an elderly inmate behind bars because of other factors such as healthcare costs. State and federal prisons spend about $16 billion in taxpayer dollars a year keeping elderly convicts behind bars. Roughly $3 billion taxpayer dollars are being spent annually to provide health care to the sick and dying prisoners. Why should hard work and money be spent on criminals? This money can be spent on something else more useful that can help everyone, not just those behind bars. If elderly inmates are released early from prison, then they will be responsible for their own health care and the costs. This means that less taxpayers' dollars will be spent on the inmates. Some people may argue that older inmates should not be released early. They may say that everyone should do their time no matter how old they are or what health conditions they have. This can be true, but releasing these inmates can save the state and taxpayers a lot of money. Some older inmates are not a threat to the community, but those that are should stay behind bars. The state needs to be cautious about who they let back into the community. They need to make sure that only the elderly inmates who pose no threat to the community are released early. Some people may argue that older inmates should not be released early. They may say that everyone should do their time, but not all elderly inmates pose a threat to the community. The state needs to be cautious about who they do let back into the community. They need to make sure that all the inmates they release pose no threat to the community, and this will save a lot of money for taxpayers and the state.